What is going on, YouTube people? Northeast Ohio Cards and Comics here. Today to go over some comps on recent grading companies. There's been a ton of talk the last week about grading with HGA in the news and this, that, and the other thing. So I did this, I don't know, about a month, 2 months ago. I can't remember the last time I did this. And I feel like it's a good exercise to do like every 30, 60, 90, whatever. Just, once every couple of months. Just to kind of check in, find a couple cards that have sales in all the grading companies on around the same time, which can sometimes be very tricky. That's why, people, sometimes when I do these, people comment on the cards that I've chosen or, that sort of stuff. Honestly, I choose the cards off what I could find comps on that all have a recent comp in the same card and is a semi-relevant card. Today we're going to be looking at LaMelo Ball Prism and our Herbert Select Optic Holo. Spoilers. So I don't want to compare cards that don't have recent comps. I want there to be comps with at least within a week or so of each other to give it a fair situation. I don't want to try to do a math equation and figure out what I think the comp would be because one hasn't sold in a month. And on some of the newer companies, that's the case sometimes. So there's been a lot of talk about, X grading companies catching Y grading company and selling prices. And this one's the new number 2 and this one's 3, but this one's coming up from the back and it's going to pass them up or whatever. So I was like, okay, let's dive in and take a peek at this. So that is what we are going to do today. So like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff down below. We're going to be using a mix of market movers, eBay, and 130 point today because some of the companies are not in the old market mover software. So let's go ahead and dive in. Start with LaMelo Ball Base Prism. Nothing fancy, just a LaMelo Base Prism. Let's run through them. PSA 10. And once again, these all recently sold, some the same day. A PSA 10 did 680 on 9/27. BGS did 300. This is a BGS 9.5. That was on 9/23, so fairly recent. SGC 10 did 255. Same day as the PSA 10. 9/27, 9/27. CSG. This one ended on the 16th, so it's a little older, but it's at least recent enough. 122. Ouch. And then HGA, we have a very recent sale here on the 29th of September at 150. Prior to that, 145, 165, 140. And now we're getting back in the mid and early September. 170, so I don't want to go too far back there. So we're just going to call it 150. We have a 140, a 165, a 145, and a 150. We're just going to call that 150. CSGs, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. We'll go to 125, 130-ish on that one since it's a little older. But I don't know that LaMelo's market's moved that much. It's basically been pretty flat on most of his cards. SGC at 255, BGS 9.5 at 300, and PSA 10 at 681. PSA 10 does have a pop of 200. That's obviously a little artificially low because cards are going to be coming back. So do I expect this gap to narrow a little bit? Yes. But as we're going to see in some other cards, it's not actually that far out of line when you look at some of the more lower pop shiny stuff on other cards. So the clear thing here is PSA is still about 50 to 60% above most of the competition. That has not changed. SGC and BGS being very close to each other is what I see. A lot of cards, depending on the individual card and the individual timing, it's basically a coin flip on whether the SGC 10 will outsell the BGS 9.5. Some days you'll see it, some days you won't. Other days you'll see it, other days you won't. But they're very interchangeable and they're very close together in comps. I'd actually probably give the SGC 10 a little bit of an edge in regards to comps. I would prefer personally a BGS 9.5 True Gem over an SGC 10. That's just me. I like BGS's slab better, but Comps are fairly similar. You can see there's actually not a lot of comps on the BGS 9.5. There's only 8 that have sold, 25 SGC and 41 PSA. So even though the PSA is pretty low pop, more have sold in a PSA slab than an SGC slab, actually, by both combined. CSG, there was only 1 or 2 sales. Once again, the two big yikes here are, you know, this one it's almost 700, 300, 250. These two are very close. Then you drop down here, CSG at 125-ish and HGA at 150-ish. Not great. So here's the thing. Obviously, just because it's reselling for this price, this is one of those cards that I actually, maybe at 150 it starts to make sense. I'd have to check 9 comps. But let's say you acquire it raw. You know, this is, I don't want to go into the whole process here, but this is one of the ones that borderline you need to do the math on to see where to send it. At 150, what does this go for in a PSA 9? I'm going to guess in a 9, you're probably losing money on it. Or slightly, maybe breaking even. I'll add PSA 9 in real quick here. Well, I guess I'll add SGC 9 and 9.5 while I'm doing it. I don't want to completely derail this, but for the thought process experiment here, we will look to see what we have. A PSA 9 goes for $200. SGC 9.5 goes for $125, and an SGC 9 goes for $88. So depending on your cost to acquire the card is where it's going to boil down to whether or not this makes sense for PSA or not. This is a good example of that. Actually, the PSA 9 going for $200 is not that much less than the SGC 10, surprisingly. Usually you don't see it this close together. But this is a borderline card on where to send it to in regards to grading. The key takeaway here is, and I know I can already hear the comments now, you know, you're a PSA fanboy, whatever. There are other options to grade your cards with that make sense that aren't PSA. I talk about it all the time. This, in my opinion, is a definite candidate for SGC. I would not send it to BGS. Their cheapest tier right now is $250. That makes 0 sense. 0. SGC at 30, at least you can make a little bit of profit there, but it doesn't make sense to send them to these two. Why would you send it to HGA or CSG for the same amount, if not more, to get it graded when you could just send it to SGC and sell it for more? Makes sense? So, yes, I like purchasing PSA slabs on the secondary market, but when it comes to grading to flip, you got to do the math. And on here, you're nuts to send a LaMelo-based Prism pretty much anywhere other than PSA or SGC. It does not make sense financially. Whether you go to PSA or not, it's going to depend on your risk tolerance, how good you think it is, and what you got into the card for. Did you buy a single pack and pull it so you're into it for practically nothing? Then you can roll the dice with PSA, because if you get the 9, you might actually still make a little bit of money. If you pull the 10, you're going to be up major. If you send it to SGC, you got a little bit more wiggle room there. So this is one of those cards you need to do your research on, but it absolutely, positively makes no sense to send it to CSG, which is going to be the same price or more expensive to grade with subgrades and probably take longer, or HGA, which is, I don't remember HGA's pricing off the top of my head, but it is close to SGC pricing. But SGC's turnaround times, I believe, are actually faster right now, or close. But you're in at 9.5, you're only getting 150. In SGC 10, you're getting 250. So also note, for all people that say I hate SGC, this is me telling you this card should probably be sent to SGC. Unless you're feeling frisky, send it to PSA. So those are the comps on that. Once again, I see no gap closure between SGC, BGS, and PSA. They're still 50 to 60% over. And I see the other two companies, CSG and HGA, lagging very far behind on this card. It makes no sense to send this card to these two companies. Send it to SGC, send it to PSA. People say all the time, we need alternatives to, good alternatives to PSA. That's perfectly fine. Competition in the market is good. You have it. It's SGC. Let's look at another one. This one, so I cherry picked this one. 100% cherry pick this one, only because it's kind of a weird card to have one. I don't have a lot of other comps for this, but in a PSA slab and an SGC 10 ending on the same day, in the same card, in the same grade. So we have a PSA 10 red ice LaMelo, Pop 200, and an SGC 10 red ice LaMelo. Both auctions, PSA 10 did 1250, 1265. The SGC 10 did 535. So this kind of backs up what we're seeing here on the base card. 681 for PSA, 300 for, I'm sorry, 250 for SGC. You know, what is that, about 50, 60%, about 60%. And here we're basically seeing pretty much the same thing, give or take, within a few percentage points either way. Now, I can already hear what the SGC people are going to say. You can't sell SGC at auction. Here's my response to that. And I'm going to take SGC out of it. If the response is to whatever grading company you choose to use, you shouldn't run them at auction. You should sell them at best offer, buy it now only. That's a problem. If you are grading these cards, if you're sending these cards out to grade for PC, it's whatever. It doesn't make a difference. If you're sending them out to grade to sell, you need to be able to sell them to get the money back and then put it into play in the next thing. That means just firing it up at an auction and letting it do its thing. So you can get that money back out of it and then move it into the next thing before something happens to the player or the market shifts or whatever. If the answer is you have to let it sit at a best offer, buy it now, and wait for a buyer to come, that's not an answer I want to hear. I want to be able to confidently auction off my card and know about what I'm going to get for it. I think that's a pretty fair statement to make. If I'm sending a card in to grade, unless I'm specifically trying to time a market a specific way, like, you know, I'm sending baseball prospects now to get back in time for the February-March run-up, and I'm going to sit on those until February-March. That's a different story. I'm just talking about you cracked a LaMelo last week in a break. You want to get it graded and flip it at the beginning of the NBA season. You don't want to wait for a buyer to come to you. Sometimes it's good to run the auction and force the buyers to make a decision. That's why it's there. That's why auctions are good. Maybe you don't get max dollar value out of it, but it gets the money back into your pocket to be able to go do the next thing. So whether it's CSG, SGC, HGA, BGS, whatever, if your answer or if your statement is don't sell them at auction, to me, that's a big negative hit on the viability of your grading company on the secondary market in regards to how the market demands that slab, if you will. And I get it. This whole thing doesn't make sense. They're both these cards are an SGC 10 and a PSA 10. It's the same damn card inside the slab. Why does this one sell for $1,250 more? And why does this one sell for $550? Why does it sell for almost double? It's just a dumb label. It's just a dumb piece of plastic. It is what it is. The market is going to market. It's an easy thing to say. It's kind of a cop-out answer, but I don't know how else to explain it to you. So I have a video coming out next week kind of talking about how I think PSA kind of got to this place in everyone's mind. It's already pre-recorded. It's already ready to rock and roll. That video will be dropping sometime next week. Just kind of talking about how I think we got here. It's a little speculative, you know, just opinion-based, but whatever. I'll be curious to see what you guys and girls think on that one. So, you know, here's another more rare card, not a base card, that backs up the same percentages. Like I said, I couldn't find a BGS 9.5 or the other ones in this. It's kind of a weird one. But I assume the numbers would fall right in line. Let's look at a football player, Justin Herbert, Optic Hollow, Donruss 2020. PSA 10, we have pop almost 500. That seems like a very fair number on that card. Last sale date 9/28, went for $950, so just under 1K. BGS 9.5. Now this is one, there's not a real current sale on this one. 9/12, so you're going back a couple weeks. Most recent SGC sale, very close to the PSA 10 sale at $435. Just based off of what this looks like, I'm assuming the Herbert sold before the BGS Herbert sold before he dipped a little bit and came back up. My guess would be if one of these sold today, it would be around this SGC price. Maybe 450-ish, 425-ish, 400. I'm going to go ahead and put it right around the same range as the SGC 10. We're not that far off from that number. But you still see the same thing. Here, the PSA 10 Herbert Optic Holo is selling for a little more than double of both the SGC and the BGS, even though this isn't a super recent comp. Let's look at a couple others. Here's an HGA Optic Holo. This one just went on the 27th, and it went for $465. So in this case, the HGA did a little bit better than it did on the LaMelo side. $465 versus $435 and $480, but still about half of PSA. So in this case, the Herbert Optic Holo basically went for the same. I'm going to essentially group all three of these together. The SGC 10, the BGS 9.5, and the HGA 9.5. Given the dates, they're all pretty close together. They basically all sold for around the same amount, give or take $15 either way. PSA did $950. CSG, they take a big ouch on this one. One just sold the day before. This PSA 10 went on 9/28. The SGC went on 9/26. This one went on 9/27. There is a recent CSG comp from the 28th, $300. And that was a best offer accepted. It was sitting at $400 and not selling. So that $400 price is under what all these other ones sold for, and no one was hitting the bin on it. $300. Here's some auctions before that. $355. $350. $266. That's a scope. Oh, that's a scope too. Sorry, we got thrown in the old mix there. So the last couple are $300, $355, and $350. These two are going back to mid to early September. So, take that for what it is. But the most recent comp is $300. And like I said, this was sitting there at 400 bin, and no one smacked the bin when these other ones were going for 400. So HGA a bit more competitive on the Optic Holo over the LaMelo Prism base, but still right in line with SGC, BGS, right there with them. So those are the two primary cards we're going to look at. Like I said, it's hard to find cards that all have comps on around the same time frame. So the big takeaway here is, as always, if you're submitting the grade to flip, do your homework. If you're buying already slabbed cards to flip later in life, my same rule goes. I'm mostly sticking to PSA with a little bit of BGS mixed in if I can find good deals, because the numbers show that they're just more liquid. If you're sending in to grade, you're sending in raw to flip, grade to flip, you just need to do your homework on which one makes the most sense. Across the board, in general, SGC is probably the no-brainer. They're still running relatively quick turnaround times, $30 a card, and their comps are in line with pretty much everybody else. And in my opinion, they have better brand recognition than the other companies, especially HGA and CSG. BGS is right there with them. The problem is BGS is so expensive to grade with, it makes no sense to use them for current stuff, except for maybe some RPAs or whatnot. The other big takeaway I have from this is CSG is really behind on comps, like really far behind on comps. I guess that would be a potential good target to go buy cards. If you were looking to buy high quality graded cards, a lot of people respect their grades, but man, oh man, they are not getting the respect on the secondary market. And as much as, I mean, this kind of proves the point. People really respect CSG's grading. Most of the market, this will be, I mean, I don't know if this is a hot take, is a little, let's just call it skeptical on HGA's grading. However, HGA outcomps them. Why is that? And why does PSA, to go back to an earlier point, why does a PSA 10 in a LaMelo Red Prism drastically outsell an SGC in the same thing? It's pretty simple. People are buying the label, not the card. Everyone says buy the card, not the grade. Everyone says it, but it's clear the secondary market does not do it. I mean, the numbers and the evidence are right there. So it kind of is what it is. Will that perception ever change? I don't know. That's the thing you hear the most. Oh, eventually it's going to catch up. It's going to catch up. It's going to even out. Something's going to happen. I don't know that it does. I really don't. I think the only thing that disrupts it is the Fanatics equation on this that we don't really know much about yet. So more on this, like I said, next week. I'm going to do a little bit more of kind of a, I don't want to call it in-depth, but more of a think piece on how we got here with PSA 10s drastically outselling everybody else. So that's all I have for you guys and girls today. Like, comment, subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Peace.